February 23rd, 2021. The weather's nice. The snow is melting. And I need someone to make a motion to approve the minutes of December 2nd, 2020 and January 26th, 2021, please. Thank you, Ms. Duncan, and thank you, Ms. Bryant, on the second. Are there any additions or corrections to either set of minutes? Who do we have on the phone, Scott?
You have Eden, Rob, and Paul.
Do we need to get a dispensation to get them to
We do
participate?
not. Your rules allow us.
Thank you. Welcome, Paul. Welcome, Eden. Welcome, Rob. Any corrections? All right. All those in favor of the minutes as submitted, please say aye.
Aye.
On the phone? How about you guys on the phone?
Rob, how do you vote? Aye. Paul?
Aye.
And Eden, how do you vote?
Thank you all. That'd be unanimous. We move straight then to informational. Mr. Sorrell, how would you like to cover this?
Happy to walk through the bulleted items here under informational on the agenda, Mr. Chairman. Springdale, I believe you've got minutes in your packet, but more importantly, you've got two members of the Management Authority Board sitting in the room, and I'm sure they can update the committee better than I could. So I'd turn it over to either Member Daly or Member Pastuccia to do that real quick, if they have anything.
A or B?
I would just say that the authority board has started a new phase once we did strategic planning and we came up with 3 goals. Then we have committee meetings in lieu of a board meeting every other month to specifically work on each of those 3 goals and to revise the bylaws. So we'll let you know when we have the results of those committees.
Thank you. Any other comment from Springdale representative? Seeing none, Mr. Sorrell.
As it relates to monthly gap loan report, all current loans, all active loans are current, so happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? Any comment from the auditor? I did not see the auditor.
Yes, the auditor's report is to be in your pamphlet if you guys have any questions.
Thank you.
No questions. Okay.
All right. We just went through Headington. Do any of the members present or on the telephone want any additional comment? Ms. Groves Allison? Sold. Messing with you. Anyone else? Seeing none, we could move on. Mr. Sorrell?
Next would be a new informational item for the committee, and that is both the urban and the rural enterprise zone project report. You'll find it on page 26 in your packet. So it just itemizes from 2020 the projects, private development that occurred within the enterprise zone. So happy to try and answer any questions you would have.
Thank you. Questions? Anyone on the phone? All right, we'd be at the first resolution then. Could I get a motion on the Distillery Lab Smart City project? Thank you, Mr. Salzer. And a second from, thank you, Kate Pastuccia, Ms. Pastuccia. Mr. Sorrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to tee this up, and then I'm going to turn it over to Amy, who's been coordinating the project on our behalf. What you're actually voting on today, and the board would be voting on, assuming it comes out of committee, is an agreement with IDOT for a state research and planning grant, or an SPR grant, valued at $800,000. There's $200,000 of local match for a total project cost of $1 million. There are multiple partners at the local level comprising that local match. We are the largest stakeholder, and the funds that we have budgeted cover the local match that is noted in the agenda briefing. I'm going to turn over to Amy now to talk a little bit more about what a Smart City and Living Laboratory is. We also have representatives from Distillery Labs and Hanson Professional Services who are coordinating the project with us today as well, if there's any questions for them.
Thank you. When you say Amy, do you mean Highway Amy? Welcome, Amy.
Amy, can you turn the microphone on, please?
Apologize. As Scott said, this is an IDOT grant. This is for to do possible economic development, growing businesses in the areas of smart cities. So anything that might be connected to the infrastructure that we have, cars getting connected to each other, cars getting connected to the infrastructure, and trying to set up a climate where we can do some innovation in that area. Distillery Labs, this would help them in their efforts. Paul from Distillery Labs is here. If you'd like to have a couple words about what they're doing, we're trying to assist them. So this is essentially a pass-through type of grant from IDOT. We are the sponsors. They needed a local agency to sponsor it, and the county applied for the grant. So if it's okay with the chairman, I'd like to introduce Paul from Distillery Labs, if that would be.
Please do. Welcome, Paul.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Lehman. I'm the new executive director of Distillery Labs. Been here in Peoria now for 6 weeks. Excited for the future of Peoria region from an innovation and entrepreneurship perspective. So Distillery Labs is really intended to be a hub for entrepreneurial activities, startup ideas, ingraining the entire community into a process forward of starting companies as a way for economic development. There are three different pillars of Distillery Labs work. In addition to any type of startup company that we can support, one of those is through a Smart Mobility, Smart Cities initiative, which aligns with this project. Health and wellness for underrepresented communities. And then third, around agriculture, food, and farming systems. So those are really the three key pillars of what we see as a great strength of the Peoria region, of companies that have already pursued some ideas and innovations around these spaces. And Distillery Labs is really meant to bring together all of these ideas as a place to drive innovation. And again, hopefully over years to come, hundreds of new startup companies representing all corners of the Peoria region. So I'm excited to be here and excited for this particular project.
Thank you. Before you leave, sir, I don't believe a whole lot of folks in the room know what Distillery Labs is, so would you mind giving us a 5-minute primer, please?
Absolutely. So Distillery Labs is a state-funded grant proposal to take over what is the Thomas Building on Adams and Fulton Street, downtown Peoria here. It is the old ICC building. So we were awarded in 2019 a $10 million state grant that is meant for capital improvements of that building. We are as well seeking an Economic Development Administration grant of an additional $2 million to fully develop that building. So the building intentionally will be an incubator space. So in the basement, we are configuring a maker space component where if you have a physical product idea that you're pursuing, we will have equipment for you to create prototypes and test that product. On the first floor, a community gathering space. So anybody interested in entrepreneurship and innovation, we'll have various educational programs, workshops, networking events, a cafe space to come and mentor or get mentored by folks that are thinking about starting a company. The Greater Peoria Economic Development Council will have space there, so they're moving their offices to Distillery Labs, in addition to the Peoria Chamber of Commerce. So really gathering a lot of different resources in one location around the theme, again, of driving innovation and entrepreneurship. On the second floor as well will be co-working space for independent entrepreneurs that are looking to proceed with a business idea. And then we're working on some rooftop concepts. So if you know that building, it's a fantastic location for utilization of a rooftop. We've got already elevator access that goes there. So we're hoping for a test kitchen for food-based entrepreneurs, potential for a test garden area, outdoor event space and gathering space. So in all, about a 53,000 square foot project, again, around kind of this entrepreneurship and innovation theme.
But tell me now, why should we care?
We think that economic development, there's certainly lots of different tools to drive economic development in a region. From my perspective, and I think from those that have really sponsored this, one of the best tools is to create an atmosphere, what we would consider an entrepreneurial ecosystem, where there's a lot of support in the area for folks that want to start a company, build a company, launch a company, and add employment base based on that. So great examples like natural fiber welding that is expanding in the space was started right here in Peoria, and is now has close to 100 employees and thinking about doubling that over the next year. A startup company that would fit right into what we're trying to build at Distillery Labs.
I don't recall welding going through an incubator when they began, so how about some examples of some projects that community leaders might know that went through a local incubator?
So locally here, a spin-off company from OSF Healthcare in Duvo would have gone through an incubator-style program just like this. Bump Boxes had some relation to incubators locally here. So I think there's maybe not a depth of examples here in the Peoria region, but certainly coming from Chicago, a place like 1871 that has about 600 different entrepreneurs at any given time, venture capital firms that are housed in that same location, mentor corporations. So we're seeking partnerships with folks like OSF Healthcare, Unity Point, Caterpillar, and others that have great innovation practices that as a way to drive entrepreneurship inside their organizations, they're looking to outside community entrepreneurs to help do that.
So while you're breathing new life back into the Thomas K. Thomas building, your organization is a 501c3, so you're governed, I assume, by a private board of directors?
We are. That is correct.
Thank you. All right. Y'all have any questions for him? I help expose a little bit of some of the stuff I hear at my EDC meetings. I don't think you see this in many of our materials, so I'm only helping you in this tough room today. Ms. Daly is next, but part of what we're being asked for is to shore up $200,000 of a $1 million grant app. Is that right?
So we'll coordinate the local match, totaling 200. 140 of that is ours. The other 60 is from other community stakeholders. But it'll funnel through us.
Dare I ask what the city of Peoria put in?
They are in. They are in currently for 50,000.
Okay, thank you.
And the CEO council would make up the other 10. And then after any committee member questions, Mr. Chairman, I'll have one final summary statement to make.
Sure. Ms. Daly.
I would just speak in favor of this, as I'm only familiar with it through the fact that Representative Spain has weekly meetings and has worked on this diligently. And I personally have always believed that the smartest thing to do is to grow your own businesses from local people as opposed to trying to get people to come here from, let's say, San Francisco, which is probably not going to happen. So I would speak very favorably in terms of providing capital to do this.
Thank you. Mr. Ricker?
This is Eden. I have a question or comment.
Dr. Blair, go ahead, then Mr. Ricker.
I apologize, I can't see who's there. I just want to say I'm in full support of this. Entrepreneurial ecosystems are needed, strong ecosystems are needed for entrepreneurs to thrive. Peoria has the livability, the talent, and the resources available to have a strong ecosystem, and we need to be able to support that to really both keep and attract people to start their businesses in this area.
Thank you. Dr. Blair, Mr. Ricker.
I guess I just wanted to ask, and you know, I think just as we've heard from Member Daley and Member Blair that growing locally is good. I wanted to ask, there was a couple of years ago we had an initiative for autonomous transportation initiative here for downtown. Is there any element of that that relates to this, or is that totally a separate discussion?
There is some linkage, Mr. Ricker, and this is, I would say, this is born out of that original project. And I think between the team here, if you've got something, if you want to know something more specific, I think the team can kind of address that and give a little bit more detail if you'd like.
Would either of you like to comment on that?
Kurt.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Kurt Breiler-Bresky with Hanson Professional Services. I'm our Chief Innovation Officer, and located here in Peoria, actually. So this is part my job, doing innovation and innovation activities for civil engineering or infrastructure type activities, civic innovation. But also, it is where I live, and so it means a lot from an economic development and community standpoint to me, and to and see the success of the region. As far as your question goes in relation to the United States Department of Transportation ADS grant, this was born from that. It is a separate effort, and that one was more focused on putting some vehicles from autonomous stuff over in Morton on the street and collecting data and giving it to the U.S. Department of Transportation to make rules and to support lawmaking activities around connected and autonomous vehicles. This is more of an ecosystem environment where we would basically be working with Paul's staff to be out and about and trying to market companies here locally and also throughout the country or wherever it be to come and use this. And it's more than just mobility in this instance. It's more about a smart city connected environment. And so as Mr. Searle noted, it's definitely something that's related but different. From the perspective of how they are very similar is that a lot of the same equipment that we would be purchasing up front with $300,000 or the $1 million is very similar. We'd still be making high definition 3D maps for vehicles or different things to potentially use and deploy that Distillery Labs would own and give to people to use in like a laboratory type setting out in the built environment, or even different radios or different traffic signal connections or potentially on the smart city side, even water usage or monitoring type systems. And so that information and the premise of the US DOT grant was to retain that information and then build this. And so since we finished 14th out of the 72 applicants for that grant application, I think 7 of them were funded. Since IDOT had this state research and planning funds available, and the University of Illinois network was looking for an incubator for something like this, it kind of just fit together to take the next step and just move into doing something that was going to be our next step anyway. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that helps, and I appreciate kind of the connection, because when you brought the transportation department into the conversation, it naturally pulls that together. The last piece I'll ask is on the statements of the $1 million worth of funding, one portion of it's for goods, products to be used, and the other is for the Hanson Consulting. There's no manpower, labor benefits and cost, and I'm assuming from Paul's earlier comments, that's funded by another grant? Or kind of help me understand the human capital cost of this and where that fits in.
Paul, I can speak to our contract. Okay, so for our contract, I can speak directly to that. I can't speak to his staffing plan. But for our contract, we are providing that manpower and capital, or human capital that you're speaking of, to Paul in the terms of a consultant who has some experience in the entrepreneurial engineering type space. So that they'll be working anywhere from 20 to 40 hours a week under Paul's direction and supervision in this grant type. We cover those costs in our fees back to that. You know, we just like engineering services that we do for Amy McLaren at the County Highway Department. So there is no additional cost for you to that perspective. You know, I would actually add too that as we bring in other partners and do other recruitment to try to generate more, I guess, available money for operating expenses, you know, that'll be then Paul's choice to determine how he moves forward with staffing and those things. So I'll let.
Yeah, from a staffing perspective for Distillery Labs, right now it's a party of one. It's just me. So we're just getting started with how to put around kind of exactly what needs to happen with all those various verticals, in addition to any other entrepreneurial program that is developed. So for now, this is where we're leaning on Hanson and Kurt's ability to run this through the staff. And we're going to house that at Distillery Labs, so a location that can then be central for other corporations that want to take advantage of the infrastructure that's getting put in place.
Well, that's good, and welcome to Peoria. Maybe you didn't explain maybe your background, and if Chairman, Paul give me a little background of his experience in bringing to the party to our community, would that be appropriate?
Sure.
Thanks.
He was recruited.
That's right. So I'm coming down from Chicago. Excited to be here again. It's going on, I guess, 7 weeks now. But my background is a combination of work in the corporate sector with consulting and a company in Washington, D.C. called Booz Allen Hamilton for a number of years, and then investment banking work out of Charlotte, North Carolina with what used to be First Union. It's now been gobbled up by Wells Fargo. So that was the first half of my career. The last 17 years, 16 and a half, 17 years, I've been an entrepreneur. So starting companies in places like Indianapolis and Chicago, from healthcare technology service companies to telecom and financial services. So I've been involved in either starting or co-founding 6 different companies, some that have been venture capital backed and have had successful exits, to others that are more small and medium-sized business type of enterprises. So excited to really begin a third phase of my career in giving back to the entrepreneurial community. There have been lots of mentors that have helped guide me. I've learned a lot along the way, and creating a space where, you know, entrepreneurs kind of know how to plug into the community, know what the process is, how to seek funding, where to seek funding, how to put together their business model that makes sense. Finding product market fit is an exciting endeavor to be able to give back to others that are just starting on the entrepreneurial journey.
Thank you. Did I see a hand up? So the local folks, the Distillery Labs, that is a partnership between OSF Healthcare, University of Illinois Discovery Partners Institute, Illinois Central College, excuse me, and the Greater Peoria EDC. Together with the appropriation from the prior governor, which I think was $500 million, tech connections from the University of Illinois throughout all of its universities into about 11 Illinois cities where universities from the state exist, plus 5 in Chicago, are all part of this capital investment that the state front funded. They also put together another $500 million in private sector funding to support that government $500 million that, I'm sorry, I can't remember the previous governor's name. I'm not joking about that. Help me out, Scott.
Rauner.
Governor Rauner. You'll remember towards the final budget of his fourth year, this funding was put together. Representative Spain has been the local official who has been chasing it, connecting it to OSF, ICC, and now this joint partnership. The identification of this downtown building, the Thomas Center, is, I don't want to say coincidental because it's near Ministries soon to be opened headquarters downtown. But the EDC, which we are a member of, and I cover those meetings for you, is the other major partner. So I have a little bit of background in the subject, but I wanted to give you guys a little bit of credit because credentialing in here, because we haven't heard from you before. Now, do you think this will be your last request for some local support?
Probably not.
All right, thank you.
I think we've got a lot of great ideas that there could be some other interesting projects down the road. So certainly, developing an entrepreneurial ecosystem is a very long-term endeavor. A 15 to 20-year horizon. So there's various things that we've got to begin to build the foundation of now. But would not close the door on great opportunities in the future.
The ribbon cutting for your project was hosted by our current governor some months ago. I think it was before you were hired. Could you tell us to what extent the current governor's mantle is involved in the project?
So I believe that announcement happened November 2019. So Governor Pritzker was involved and came and was the keynote speaker of that, but is very, very supportive. He continued ex-Governor Rauner's project in terms of continuing to capitalize this. As you mentioned, that this is one of 15 other Illinois innovation hubs, but is the only one that's not connected directly to a university, even though we have the president of Bradley that sits on our board and certainly the president of ICC that sits on our board as well.
Thank you. Anyone else need any more understanding as to why we might want to do this? Hearing none. On the phone, you guys good? All those in favor of the resolution as submitted this afternoon, please say aye. On the phone, please.
Paul, how do you vote?
Aye.
Rob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Eden, how do you vote?
Aye.
Motion carries.
That would be unanimous. Thank you. Does any of the committee chairpersons need to leave early? All right, so operations, Mr. Renaud.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We only had one resolution, and it was a grant that Becky sought out and was awarded for $25,000 to help with intake diversion programs. And that was all.
Thank you. Mr. Salzer, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our committee met and we had 4 resolutions, and we're happy to report that they were all unanimous. The first one, in fact, the first 2 resolutions are intertwined. The first one was ours going into an intergovernmental agreement with the Medina Road District, and it has to do with the replacement of a 1-lane bridge up in Mr. Fennell's area. He can probably tell you more about the region and so forth. It's called Dickinson Lane, and it's near Mossville Grade School, not too far from the Caterpillar plant up there. And This is a one-lane bridge. It was first built in 1939. I think they rehabbed it somewhere in 1970, and now it's going to be built again, replaced in 2023. And the Medina Road District, they're going to use their funds from Rebuild Illinois, and of course we'll be using our bridge funds in regard to that. The second resolution has to do with a hiring of a engineering firm as suggested by our highway department. Amy McLaren and Mr. Gillis both are recommending that we use Mauer Stutz, and that will be a 50-50 situation on that for phase 1 and phase 2 with the Medina Road District. Third resolution has to do with an area out in Elmwood. It's the repair of a concrete box culvert, and this too is an engineering thing for preliminary work to be done on this by 2023. The project will be completed, and we will use our bridge funds in regard to this. This is again Mauer Stutz. Mauer Stutz is suggested for this. The fourth one is a major product over the next few years, and I'm not going to give you all the details on it because it's not going to be probably completed until about 2025, and it's got a lot of different phases that they're going to go through, and the first phase is just to hire an engineering firm. Now, what this has to do with is a building of a road, redoing a road out there, and this road also will stretch from 116 over to Middle Road. And the engineering firm that we're going to use on this is Crawford, Murphy, and Tilley. Along with this, this first phase of the engineering, because in about a year they're going to come to us again with a second phase. And the first phase, Crawford, Murphy, and Tilley, we are going to probably, I think that they estimated that it's around $364,000. So rather than tell you everything that's going to go on over these next few years, they're going to, of course, rehab that bridge. Now, this bridge is right there by the by Airport Lumber, and I think it's Hare Engineering or Hare Construction. The operating engineers, the motorcycle. We were told that this is the largest of all of the bridges that we have in our county, but all of this, of course, can't be done overnight, and it's going to take some time. Does anybody have any questions on it?
Any questions?
Incidentally, I probably should have said Maxwell Road is the stretch of road that they're going to do from 116 over to the one there at Middle Road.
Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Salzer. Mr. Ricker, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the Ways and Means, we had 3 resolutions. The first was our monthly delinquent tax sale. We had just 2 line items on that one that were approved. The second item we had was from our county clerk's office. The county clerk has a resolution for rolling over funds from 2020 fiscal year into 2021 for the purchase of a glass divider panels for the county clerk's office in the amount of $5,440. So that was to finish up a project that the county clerk had in flight to put dividers in to provide safety for the employees in the clerk's office. So it's appropriating the money and rolling it into the 2021 to finish that project. And that was passed unanimously. And the third one was from the Elections Commission. The Elections Commission also had a rollover appropriation, and this was from a grant they received in September of 2020 from a nonpartisan Center for Tech and Civic Life. If you remember, back in September, we approved in a grant that the Elections Commission applied for in the amount of $109,544 for the Election Commission. So that grant had been approved and the monies had been received. The monies were tied to the November election. And so with the November cycle, there were some funds that were not spent of that grant. So there was another additional a residual $19,430 that were not spent, that were approved by the granting agency that allow us to roll it over into 2021. So those funds can be used in 2021 for improvements and things that tie to the current election cycle. So that was put on, and that was unanimously approved. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from folks on the phone? Anybody in the room? Thank you. Mr. Dillon, land use.
We had one resolution for an IDA Strong Communities Program Grant Award. This is how we funded a lot of demolition for houses inside the county. So Kathy and her team secured another $84,500 grant, and that does come with a 5% administration fee. So that's going to equates to about 8 houses. We've already had one tore down, so the grant does allow you to switch it to houses. So typically a lot of these have been in limestone, but the ones that she's identified are a little bit all over the county. So it's a grant, only pays for residential houses, but it's something I think we've secured over $300,000, Scott, in the last few years. So it's a great program for us.
Any questions on the phone regarding Mr. Dillon's update? Mr. Rosenbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to thank Vice Chairwoman Bryant for running the meeting for me today. We had one resolution and a presentation I want to talk about first from the sheriff. It's on HB 3653. He gave a summary of that bill that the governor just signed this week. The sheriff, the good news was there's 70% of it he was in favor of and to work with. The other 30%, he hopes to get more clarification and hopefully some monetary support from the state for the parts that they have to implement on training and so forth. The resolution was for $152,664 for the courts. for the AOIC Rapid Relief Funding for Remote Capabilities Program. That's where they can get the more audio-visual equipment, new laptops for the judges in the courtrooms. This is all just upgrades so they can do Zoom meetings and other online meetings and so forth. So that passed unanimously. Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Rosenbaum? On the phone, you guys okay with Paul's brief but informative presentation? Thank you, Paul. Sharon, County Health.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had no resolutions. We just had committee reports from Board of Health and Care and Treatment, EMA, Regional Office of Educations, and we also got an update on the sustainability plan from Becca. So that was it.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Williams? On the phone? Anyone on the phone? All right, we'll move on to the next item. Mr. Fennell.
We didn't have any resolutions. We had monthly finance report and the Headington Oaks report. The biggest thing that came out of that was a format for a plan for attacking our accounts receivable, bad debt, and trying to measure that each quarter to where we have some resolution to that AR.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Fennell? Anyone on the phone? All right, we'd be at miscellaneous. Any miscellaneous business for the good of the order?
Mr. Chairman, I have one if the committee members don't have any.
You have one?
I do,
Excellent.
Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Committee members, those that are physically here in the room, you'll have your budget in brief. We gave you a stack of 10 or 15. We've got plenty more if you have constituents that want hard copies. I believe it's also available on the website. For those members that are participating remotely and for the board members not on this committee, we'll make sure we get those to you. So it's a little trifold that talks about the FY21 budget and spending plan.
I live for these. Really, if you memorize this one, you'll know when they're cray-cray come the fall. You'll just go, no, it was 13 million last year. All right, I have nothing else. Anybody good for the order? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you very much.
Eden Blair.
Left.